PhD candidates from the Washington State University system compete in this year's 3-minute thesis competition. This year's competition is proudly presented by the College of Education, the Edward R. Murrow College of Communication, Washington State University, and Northwest Public Broadcasting. From the Pullman campus of Washington State University, this is the 3-minute thesis competition. And the host of our show, scholarly assistant professor from the Murrow College of Communication, Matt Lovelace.
Good evening and welcome to 3-Minute Thesis. 3-Minute Thesis is a research competition developed by the University of Queensland. Doctoral students have 3 minutes and not a second more to present their research in a compelling way that a generalized audience can understand. Now, Washington State University adopted this competition back in 2015, and it's now part of the university's academic showcase. Each participating college or campus within the WSU system hosts its own event. The winners take part in the main event, and tonight for the 7th year we present you that main event and all of our finalists. The winners get travel grants toward research conferences. First place gets $3,000, second place $1,500, and third place $500. Now, the rules of 3-minute thesis are simple. Each competitor gets 3 minutes to talk about their research. They may use a single static slide, which will be shown on screen while they are speaking. There's no additional electronic media, no props are allowed. Also, presentations must be in the spoken word. They can't be poems, raps, or songs. And the decision of the judging panel is final. And with that, let us quickly introduce our judges in alphabetical order by last name. We have Donna Arnold, WSU's Associate Director of Multicultural Student Services. Elizabeth Chilton, WSU Provost and Executive Vice President. Chris Keene, WSU Vice President for Research. R.J. Lott, City of Pullman Director of Planning. And Kirk Schultz, President of Washington State University. Judges, thank you so much for your time for this event. And now let's get right into our competitors. Complete information on all of these doctoral students and their research can be found at 3mt.wsu.edu. But we lead things off with Lindsey Sidak-Loftus, representing the College of Veterinary Medicine. Here's Lindsey.
Scenario. It's springtime. Forecast, sunny and 75 with a slight breeze. A perfect day to hike and explore the Palouse. So you pack up, hike along your favorite trail, stop to enjoy the view, and make it home before sunset. A perfect day. And as you go to take off your shoes, you notice a little friend on your ankle, a tick. And you start to think, ew. Of course, you also start to wonder things like, what kind of tick is this? What diseases can it transmit? And what allows for the transmission of diseases? And is there a way to prevent the disease from ever being transmitted in the first place? Well, these are all questions that we're trying to understand. As tick-borne diseases are on the rise, we're limited in our ability to combat them due to lack of vaccines, misdiagnosis, and an increase in drug resistance. So novel methods are needed. One particular method is to target the pathogens within the tick, basically prevent the transmission of pathogens in the first place. But to do this, we have to take a step back and understand what allows for a tick to acquire, maintain, and transmit a pathogen in the first place. One factor is the tick's innate immune system, though very little is known about it. So to help us understand, we can take the tick's genome, which basically makes up like you and I, and compare it to other species that have a well-defined innate immune system, like mammals and fruit flies, and see what similarities are shared. One particular pathway which is highly conserved between species is the unfolded protein response. Now, this unfolded protein response is responsible for restoring balance in a cell when stresses are applied, like an influx of unfolded proteins or infection. And when we look at the mammalian system, the unfolded protein response has been shown to interact with other innate immune processes to help limit infection. So my goal is to characterize the unfolded protein response within the tick system to determine if it has a role in pathogen colonization and transmission. And my focus specifically within the unfolded protein response is with 2 particular proteins. We can just call them IRE1 alpha and TRAF2. Now, these proteins are found at the very beginning of the pathway and are responsible for its initiation. Currently, our data has shown that the proteins have an effect on colonization of 2 different pathogens transmitted by ticks that cause human diseases, one of which is Lyme disease. We also have data indicating that both our proteins are able to interact with each other within this system, and we're currently investigating whether or not they have an impact on transmission. With characterizing this pathway, we have the potential to uncover an unconventional linkage between stress response and immunity in ticks, which could lead to novel methods in limiting transmission of tick-borne diseases to you, thus allowing you to go on your next hike without the fear of bringing home a little friend.
And that was Lindsey Sidak-Loftus. We now bring in Dr. Davi Coleman, who is an advisor with the WSU Access Center, not only recently earned her PhD, but has been a judge on this competition before. Now, after each person presents, we'll jump from the competitor to Dr. Coleman as she can share anything that stood out to her. Not only does this give the judges a few moments to tabulate their scores, but it can help give more context to our viewers. Dr. Coleman, thank you so much for joining us. We'll get your analysis of this first one from Lindsey Sidak-Loftus.
Thank you so much, Matt. Wow, Lindsey, that was such a great presentation. One thing that I noticed right off the bat is that you're talking about pathogens and stress in pathogens, a lot of things that maybe a lay audience will understand, but you broke it down for the audience so that they could understand. You looked at the audience, your slide was very minimal, which was great, so it didn't take away from what you were talking about. You started the presentation with a really great opening sentence, and then your thesis really tied into the your ending statement, which really brought back to the reason of this presentation, so that people can hike with ticks and not have to worry about getting diseases.
Dr. Coleman, thank you very much. We'll continue to go back to the doctor once we get through more of these 3-minute theses. Now, our next competitor is Grant Ely, a PhD student in the College of Nursing.
This picture represents the struggles I had as a new nurse and the challenges I've seen in others as I've served in various leadership roles in healthcare. My concern for what new nurses experience motivated me to leave my executive position and work on a solution to ensure students are prepared emotionally, technically, and intellectually to care for patients before they graduate. A recent 5-year study of 5,000 newly graduated nursing students showed that 77% could not demonstrate entry-level competency and basic readiness to care for patients. The American Association of Colleges of Nursing concluded just a few weeks ago that new thinking and new approaches are needed at nursing schools to prepare students to be work-ready by graduation. Without this type of preparation, new nurses experience high levels of stress, anxiety, and many burn out. In fact, nearly 50% of new nurses quit their job by their second year. This has a significant effect on healthcare access and quality, as almost 1.2 million patients in the United States are not receiving adequate nursing care. To become a registered nurse, a person needs to graduate from a nursing school and pass the National Nurse Certification exam. However, decades of research show that these do not guarantee that someone has the skills and competencies to be a nurse. We must change our approach to ensure that all graduating students are ready to care for their patients. The first step towards student work readiness is to determine what nurses must currently know and do. By collaborating with hospitals and clinics, we can gather the diagnoses, medications, labs, procedures, and patient education of each nurse specialty. I personally met with hospital nurse executives in Spokane and Coeur d'Alene. They are excited and support this research. This collaboration will allow us to create an innovative nursing curriculum based on actual clinical data and update it regularly with the latest challenges like COVID. With a clear focus on what students need to know and do, we can implement best learning practices like self-paced learning, situated instruction, student-to-student mentoring, and mastery. As a result of these changes, nurse retention and patient care will significantly improve as more well-trained nurses reinforce healthcare's front lines. This type of education will also solidify the value of a nursing degree, as employers see that these graduates are noticeably better prepared to care for their patients. We can provide nursing students the preparation they need to become work ready before graduating. They need our help, and sooner or later, we will need theirs. Thank you.
And bringing back in Dr. Coleman, a topical a presentation right there talking about not just technical but emotional readiness for nurses. What were your thoughts on this one?
Wow, that was a really great presentation, Grant. What I liked the most was your pace. You talked in a manner that was very easy to understand. Your topic was really relevant to the field, relevant to the world at large, and relevant to WSU because of our nursing school. I like how you tied in COVID, which shows that your research is relevant and it's to the times. But most importantly, that it's important to prep nurses to be better nurses, and that's ultimately what we try to do at an institution. So great research, great topic, great pace.
All right, moving on. Thank you very much, Dr. Coleman. Micah Radonovich is up next, representing the College of Arts and Sciences.
There has been increasing focus on atmospheric greenhouse gas concentrations, especially on increasing carbon dioxide. And during those conversations, a figure similar to the one in the top left is shown. The x-axis has time before present, going back about 800,000 years, and usually see carbon dioxide concentrations oscillating within a certain range, until we get to present time when human activities start causing it to increase drastically. But the figure in the top left isn't showing the behavior of carbon dioxide. It's actually showing nitrous oxide concentration over the past 800,000 years. Nitrous oxide, or N2O, is also a greenhouse gas and is also experiencing drastic increases due to human activity. Increases in atmospheric nitrous oxide concentration are directly tied to the invention of man-made fertilizer. But fertilizer is needed in order to increase crop yield and feed the growing global population. If we got rid of all fertilizer today, approximately 50% of the global population would not get the food they need to survive. And this is because nitrogen is a hot commodity in natural soils, and competition is really high between the plant communities and the soil microbial communities. But when we add fertilizer to agricultural soils, we overcome nitrogen limitation, decrease competition, and increase crop yield. But an unintended outcome from fertilizer addition is increased nutrient availability for soil microbial communities. Why is this bad? As biological communities transform fertilizer to gain nutrients, they're also releasing nitrous oxide into the atmosphere. And 70% of all man-made N2O comes from these transformations in agricultural soils. But we still don't know which biological communities are creating the gas. And if we don't know which biological communities are active, then we can't suggest management practices to minimize their activities and N2O emission. I am using molecular and stable isotope techniques to identify the real-time biological origin of N2O. And once active biological communities are identified, then models can be created that suggest the management techniques should be applied to reduce N2O emission. It is essential for us to be able to manage N2O emission because not only is it a greenhouse gas, it is 300 times stronger than CO2. It is currently the leading man-made cause of stratospheric ozone destruction, and N2O negatively impacts human and ecosystem health. It is predicted that N2O emission will continue to increase as future agricultural activity intensifies. So we really need to identify the biological sources of N2O to mitigate its negative effects before we really start experiencing the not so funny truth behind increasing nitrous oxide concentrations.
Micah Radonovich, Dr. Coleman, bringing you back on for your thoughts.
Great presentation. As a social scientist, there's a lot of jargon thrown around. The great thing is that the presenter here today goes through and explains why that's important. She explains why we need this model and what this model will do in the future and how it will help prevent more destruction to our ozone. So I really love the slide that the presenter used. It was kind of described that as she went through different steps. The pace was really great. Overall, great job.
And continuing on, we have Arjak Bhattacharya. He's next, a PhD student in the Voiland College of Engineering and Architecture.
Steve Austin was an American astronaut with some superhuman powers. Yes, you are right. I am talking about 1973 US television series, The $6 Million Man. But what was the secret behind his superhuman strength? It was nothing but some bionic implants inside his body. Okay, so what can happen if we combine this advanced biomedical development with something traditional and ancient. Now let us travel to India. Since antiquity, several natural medical herbs like turmeric, ginger have been used in ancient Indian medical system to treat bone injury. The major scientific question of my research is, can we combine this ancient medical knowledge with the most advanced manufacturing technology such as 3D printing to eradicate bone cancer and other musculoskeletal disorders? Currently, 1.7 billion people across the globe are suffering from musculoskeletal disorders, and bone cancer is the third most predominating cause of death among young cancer patients. Unfortunately, the next victim can be any of us. To eradicate this problem, we have taken an interdisciplinary approach which requires a domain knowledge of mechanical engineering, biomedical engineering, chemistry, medicine, and artificial intelligence. What we have done is we have incorporated the active compounds from turmeric and ginger on the 3D printed patient-specific scaffolds made up with the same material as bone. After human cell interactions, our scaffolds show that they are antibacterial, anti-cancerous, and help in new bone formation. We have also tested the performance of the scaffolds inside human body through a probabilistic artificial intelligence model, which indicate that our scaffolds will be mechanically stable and biologically active after implantation. So, through our research, we are trying to reduce the suffering of countless bone cancer patients across the globe. And it is our dream to gift them a better quality of life through our research. Thank you so much.
Well, a presentation that started with a reference to the $6 million man, Dr. Davi Coleman here with her analysis.
Wow, that was a great presentation, Arjak. And as I was listening, your opening sentence really hit home, and it got the audience's attention. So that was really important. You really got our attention. And then you talked about complex issues such as bone density, 3D printing, and how that relates into ancient medicine and how that combines together. So I really love how you related it back to the audience and you made it important to them. And then you tied your thesis back to the main conclusion. So really great job with your pace and everything included.
Thank you very much, Dr. Coleman. And Rob Spence is up next. He's here to represent WSU Vancouver.
Imagine the town next to you, a nuclear bomb was detonated. You would understandably be concerned about the effects of that radiation. Now, imagine that this happens 67 times over a period of 12 years, forcing you to move away from your home, perhaps to an area you previously considered uninhabitable. The lingering effects from the exposure to this radiation creates a legacy of stillborn babies, birth defects, sterility, and cancer among your community. This is what happened to the Micronesian Islander community between 1946 and 1958, when the United States detonated the equivalent of over 7,200 Hiroshima-sized bombs in small islands of Micronesia. As you can imagine, this caused some trust issues between Micronesian Islanders and the United States, especially in areas of research and scientific study. Now, imagine that as a child you witnessed your mother being abused, or your brother suffering from mental illness, or your father going to prison. These traumatic events are called adverse childhood experiences, or ACEs, and the Micronesian Islander community experiences ACEs at rates higher than many other ethnic groups. Exposure to ACEs increases risk for heart disease, cancer, hepatitis, and a variety of other health outcomes all the way into adulthood. But there is some hope. Early childhood learning programs like preschool and Head Start have been shown to both prevent ACEs and improve resiliency for children who are exposed to ACEs. Unfortunately, the Micronesian Islander community also has low enrollment in these programs. That's where my work comes in. our team worked with a local Micronesian Islander community organization to build trust through culturally responsive team building exercises, first within the team and then with parent leaders from the community, as a building block to developing a tool to improve Micronesian Islander enrollment in early childhood learning. While continuing to establish that trust, we worked together to build an educational toolkit to help parent leaders from the community assist families with enrolling in local early childhood learning opportunities. In the end, we built a toolkit that included interactive video and text information that parent leaders described as easy to navigate, respects their cultural values, and helpful at expanding access to early childhood learning programs. We provided evidence that this toolkit helped in preparing families to enroll in early childhood learning, a step toward improving resilience from ACEs and improving health outcomes. We anticipate that continued use of this toolkit will have positive effects on both health and social justice for the Micronesian Islander community. As scholars, we all have a responsibility to inclusion, diversity, and justice. Each step we make in that direction creates a more equitable world. Thank you.
And that's Rob Spence from WSU Vancouver. Dr. Coleman, take it away.
Thank you, Matt. Rob, that was a great presentation, especially when you're dealing with different groups that may not be relatable to us. I love that how you kept saying, imagine this. It kept bringing us back to the present. And it was a really wonderful topic, a wonderful pace. You really showed how your team is able to come up with the solutions to this toolkit. And then lastly, how you ended it using DEI language that is so important to WSU, diversity, equity, and inclusion. Great presentation.
Thanks, Dr. Coleman. Next up is Jo Crandall. She is representing the College of Education.
Imagine you've enrolled in a university course on digging holes. Like many others, the course had a prerequisite. In this case, the challenging class on tools for working with dirt. You spent a long semester learning to use all types of picks, trowels, and shovels, like this one on the left, and got an excellent grade. But on the first day of holding in class, the professor seems to expect students to be familiar with using an excavator, like this one on the right. Suddenly you're lost, and both you and your new professor suspect you've been inadequately prepared for the class. This perceived disconnect is how many engineering students can feel when transitioning from an important math prerequisite called differential equations to the engineering classes that depend on them. These differential equations are mathematical tools for understanding systems that are changing. They're used by engineers and scientists to model things like the fluctuating temperatures on a Falcon 9 rocket engine, or the speed with which a virus is spreading. For a long time, methods taught in differential equations centered around paper and pencil solutions of equations that appeared in textbooks, but almost never in the real world. More recently, math educators have been moving away from this one shovelful at a time approach by incorporating more realistic problems, focusing on conceptual understanding through problem-based learning, and the use of modern computing tools, the excavators of mathematics. Yet even with these ongoing changes to math instruction, engineering educators still find that students who encounter differential equations in engineering settings have difficulty identifying which mathematical tools to use. More work must be done to help students harness differential equations knowledge for engineering problems. In order to accomplish this, we need to understand these students' ability to interpret their math skills in problem-solving contexts. Yet while most research has focused on increasing performance in differential equations classes, almost no one has examined whether students are increasing their ability to select and apply these math skills in other contexts, a gap my research is trying to fill. This is important because research has shown that while mathematicians and engineers share many of the same tools, differences in expectations, terminology, and even disciplinary values could prevent students from recognizing when and how to apply their mathematical knowledge. And so, along with a series of cognitive task-based interviews and examining the use of differential equations in current chemical and mechanical engineering courses, I'm investigating not only the views of the math instructors, but of the engineering instructors, as well as the very students who need to build their skill set drawing from both these areas. Only through this cooperation of areas of expertise can we make informed decisions about how innovations in teaching differential equations can help equip future engineers to choose the right tool for the job. Thank you.
And bringing back in Dr. Coleman to talk about Jo Crandall's presentation from the College of Education.
Hi, Joe. What I was most impressed about was your delivery of your presentation. It was very captivating. You were really engaged with the audience, even though your presentation was already recorded. I really loved your eye contact, your pace that you set. Even the slide that you used made it very easy for a lay audience to connect with the topic. But I really understand and appreciate how you're trying to fill the gap and really improve the connection between future engineers and future mathematicians. So a really great presentation.
Dr. Coleman, thank you very much. And Micah Harold is representing the Carson College of Business and is up next.
My name is Micah Harold. I'm a fourth-year student in the Carson College of Business. And my research is important because I examine instances of consumption that consumers view as not voluntary but coerced. In order to kind of illustrate what I'm talking about here, I want to tell you a few things about my niece Elena, who's pictured in the slide. She's 3. Her favorite color is green, clearly, and she loves getting to wear makeup. I think this is because it makes her feel grown up. The irony there, of course, is that when she does grow up, things like wearing makeup, as well as shaving her legs, manicuring her fingernails, styling her hair, are going to change from things that she feels she gets to do to become things she feels she has to do. Marketers largely haven't examined the possibility that some instances of consumption are dictated by social expectations that the consumer doesn't feel they have control over, and that is kind of the gap that I'm aiming to fill in my research. Generally, I find that when women feel coerced into shaving their legs or wearing makeup, that they don't get much enjoyment out of those tasks, and as a result, they aren't willing to spend very much money on the associated products. I want to tell you one more thing about Elena, and that is that if my socialization master plan is effective, she's going to grow up to be a very strong feminist. The feminist stereotype in this case is really interesting because it's seen as in direct opposition to traditional notions of femininity, which might lead you to expect that feminist women would be particularly loath to do these gender-based sorts of tasks, and as a result be willing to spend even less money on the associated products. What I find is actually the exact opposite. Feminist women are able to reposition these tasks as sources of personal empowerment and choice, and as a result, they actually report increased enjoyment of the tasks and are willing to spend considerably more money on the products than non-feminist women. It's my hope with this research that by exposing instances of consumption that consumers feel coerced into engaging with, that I might encourage marketers to start loosening those binds and give consumers the space to kind of make their own decisions related to that sort of consumption. And additionally, it's my hope that in kind of exposing that, I'm able to let kiddos like Elena continue to get that much sheer joy out of their makeup experiences. Thank you.
And bringing back in Dr. Coleman for her analysis.
Micah, your niece is the absolute cutest. You really made us relate to her and then tied it in with your research of the sheer joy that children get from consumption and the difference between adults and how or lack of joy from that consumption, and just really showing how you can make a difference in changing marketers' perspectives regarding consumers and giving the consumers space to make their own decisions. Great presentation. It felt like a conversation, like a TED Talk. Great job.
Thank you very much, Dr. Coleman. Our next competitor represents the College of Agricultural, Human, and Natural Resource Sciences and said he would be pleased to introduce himself.
Hi, my name is Fumipitaliger. We can all relate with dairy products at some point and in some way. In fact, our very own Ferdinand ice cream has been ranked as one of the best in Washington State by some people. It is also a well-known fact that there's been an increase in the global demand for food products, and that includes dairy products. This is in order to meet the increasing demand for the increase in the human population. Now, let's move away for a moment from what we all can relate with to what many of us don't like to relate with, and that is cow dung, dairy manure. Dairy manure happens to be very rich in nutrients that beneficial for crop production. But it is wet and heavy, so it cannot be effectively and economically transported over long distances without deterioration. Over time, the farmers end up utilizing these products at locations that are close to the dairy farms. And there's now an accumulation of the nutrients at these locations, and they now constitute significant environmental and health issues. For example, they generate a lot of dust and odor, which negatively impacts the human respiratory system and comfort. They also result in greenhouse gases emissions, and they contaminate the water bodies, among several other threats to our environment and comfort. My research, in collaboration with other researchers in soil science and horticulture departments, seeks to add value to this manure. Basically, we utilize composted manure, which has significantly reduced levels of moisture and pathogens. Then we blend this compost with additives, which are materials with specific properties that can add value to the manure. For example, we utilize canola meal, and just 5% of canola meal can increase the total nitrogen in the product by up to 68%. After blending with these additives, we make them into pellets, fertilizer pellets, which can now be bagged and packaged for storage and transportation. The lower moisture content of this product means they can now be stored for longer periods and transported over longer distances without deterioration. The higher nutrient content means that we now get to transport more nutrients at the same transportation cost. It also means that the farmers now require and apply fewer quantities of this product to meet the crop's nutrient demand. So overall, we all get to enjoy our beloved dairy products while being assured of a safer environment. Thank you.
All right, Dr. Coleman back in to talk about that presentation from Fumipitaliger.
Thank you so much, Femi. What really spoke to me the most is how confident you were in this presentation. You had a really great presence. You knew exactly what you were talking about. You even introduced yourself. So we really love to see that from presenters. But you talked about a topic that's so important to WSU and the Pullman community. We have a large dairy farmer community in the area. And so I think you picked a great topic that resonates with your audience. Great job.
And our next presenter is Kasanki, a second-year PhD student representing WSU Tri-Cities.
Hello, my name is Kasanki. I'm a second-year PhD student in the School of the Environment in Dr. Sarah Rowley's lab. My dissertation research primarily focuses on assessing mutualistic interactions between arbuscular mycorrhizal fungi and free-living nitrogen-fixing bacteria in the rhizosphere of switchgrass. That's a mouthful. So basically, I'm interested in how plants like switchgrass trade carbon from photosynthesis for nitrogen and phosphorus from microbes in and around their roots. This is relevant because fertilizers are heavily applied to farm fields to increase plant growth. But fertilizer that escapes can pollute drinking water, stimulate harmful algal blooms, and contribute to global climate change. One bit of good news here is that many soil microbes can act as fertilizers and improve soil health through interactions with each other and plants. My research specifically focuses on two common groups of microorganisms, arbuscular mycorrhizal fungi and free-living nitrogen-fixing bacteria. Arbuscular mycorrhizal fungi colonize inside of plant roots and primarily exchange phosphorus for plant-derived C. Free-living nitrogen-fixing bacteria live near plant roots and can take dinitrogen from the atmosphere and convert it to a form that plants can use, a process known as nitrogen fixation, and exchange this fixed nitrogen for plant carbon. Nitrogen fixation has been primarily studied in legumes, such as soybeans and clover, but we've recently learned that these bacteria work with perennial grasses as well. Benefits of arbuscular mycorrhizal fungi to plant growth has been studied extensively for many years, but very little is known about how these fungi and bacteria work together to further benefit plant growth and soil function. I'm specifically looking at switchgrass because it is a hardy perennial grass commonly found in tall grass ecosystems across North America. It is also being developed as a biofuel crop and is used in restoration efforts. My goal is to take the current research a step further to examine how bacteria, fungi, and plants can work together to maximize nutrient cycling and maintain long-term soil function. I will quantify the contributions of fungi and nitrogen fixers to plant growth and nutrient content using stable isotopes. In addition, I will use molecular tools such as DNA sequencing and quantitative polymerase chain reaction to observe changes in the microbial community abundance and diversity over time. Results from this research will identify specific arbuscular mycorrhizal fungi and free-living nitrogen-fixing bacteria that benefit each other and switchgrass, and how changes in plant phenology alter nutrient exchange. I will also be identifying environmental factors that have potential to help or hinder this three-way interaction. Once we know who associates with switchgrass and how much nitrogen and phosphorus they can provide, and what factors control this exchange of nutrients, we can apply these results to agricultural systems, biofuel production, and restoration efforts to reduce the need for fertilizer application and restore depleted soils.
And that was Shawnee Kasanki from WSU Tri-Cities. Dr. Coleman, what did you think?
Great presentation, Shawnee. You know, as a social scientist, a lot of these words thrown around, isotopes and stuff, may not make sense to me, but you made it make sense. You included humor in your introduction, realizing that it is a mouthful, and it is, but you were able to integrate it throughout the presentation so that the audience could understand what you were saying. And using fungi and bacteria and how they work together to kind of improve the nutrients with the switchgrass that you're talking about. So great presentation, great performance.
Thank you very much, Dr. Coleman. Now, our last competitor is Ruby Siegel, representing the College of Pharmacy and Pharmaceutical Sciences.
In January 13th, 2018, an emergency alert was mistakenly broadcast to everyone in the state of Hawaii, warning them ballistic missile threat inbound to Hawaii. Seek shelter immediately. This is not a drill. Can you imagine receiving that? Thousands of tourists and residents crowded into basements and bomb shelters, making phone calls they thought might be their last. After 38 excruciating minutes, Hawaii's emergency management officials sent a follow-up message rescinding the earlier false alarm. People could finally breathe a sigh of relief and return to their plans for the day. The reason I mention this story to you is that the emergency alert system has an equally important counterpart in our bodies called inflammation. In the laboratory of Dr. Salah Ahmed, our team studies the autoimmune disease rheumatoid arthritis, which is characterized by out-of-control inflammation. My research aims to limit those false alarms. Much of the inflammation in rheumatoid arthritis is caused by a small protein message or cytokine called tumor necrosis factor alpha. You can think of TNF-alpha as the master cytokine at the top of a pyramid of inflammation. When cells receive a TNF-alpha signal, they become activated and release other factors that cause swelling and pain and recruitment of immune cells to the joint. They also produce other factors that over time degrade the protective cartilage layer at the ends of bones, causing painful joint deformities. While it's shown in this image as being in the hands, this painful process occurs in joints throughout the body. 20 years ago, drugs that inhibit TNF-alpha were developed and released for use in treating rheumatoid arthritis. While drugs targeting other factors downstream from TNF-alpha have been released, they have never proven to be as effective as TNF-alpha inhibitors. However, completely shutting off TNF's emergency signaling throughout the body leaves a person susceptible to opportunistic infections or development of cancer. My research indicates that a little-known protein called sulfatase 2 facilitates TNF-alpha signaling. For example, if I inhibit sulfatase 2 by 60% in cells, there's a corresponding 60% drop in responsiveness to TNF-alpha, including its downstream effects. SULF2 is concentrated in the joint tissue. My research indicates that by developing a drug that inhibits sulfatase 2, we can unplug TNF-alpha signaling right in the joints where it wreaks havoc. Thank you.
That was Ruby Siegel. Dr. Coleman, we bring you in one more time for your analysis.
Thank you. Ruby, great presentation. I really loved your analogy at first of the emergency broadcast system in Hawaii. I thought the presentation was going to be about that, but you brought us back into how it relates to autoimmune disease and these emergency signals that our body creates and that medications may create. So I thought it was a really interesting way to tie your presentation to catch the audience's attention. So great job, Ruby.
Dr. Davi Coleman, thank you so much for your insight throughout this competition. It's been really helpful. Now, we thank each of our competitors for their presentations. We now, of course, want to give our judges a chance to compile and submit their scores. And while that happens, we'll see how a few of WSU's colleges are doing some great research. We'll also have the chance to talk with Provost and Executive Vice President Elizabeth Chilton. And then we'll come back to find out this year's 3-minute thesis winner. Now, we start with this piece about research being done in the College of Education and their work in a virtual and augmented reality lab.
I'm Katie Abrams, and I'm the director of the WSU ROAR program. ROAR stands for Responsibility, Opportunity, Advocacy, and Respect.
I'm Dr. Don McMahon. I'm an associate professor in special education here at WSU.
The ROAR program is designed for students with intellectual and/or developmental disabilities. Right now, WSU ROAR, it's one of very few residential programs, and it is the only residential program within the state. Students have the opportunity to live in Pullman. They live in campus-run apartments, and they're really able to develop their independent living skills. And that's one of our greatest goals for the students when they leave the program, is to be able to live independently.
My work tends to focus on how to use technology, especially emerging technologies like augmented reality, virtual reality, and artificial intelligence to support students with disabilities. These technologies are becoming more and more common in our everyday lives. Many of us use Google Maps with augmented reality to help us navigate. And so a lot of what we try to do is to empower our students to live independently using a mobile learning device like their phone that follows them wherever they are.
Today, the students are learning human anatomy through virtual reality. What you'll see on the screen is you'll be placed in a medical office, and on one side you'll have a panel where students are able to choose about different systems in the body. There will be a 3D skeleton that will pop up, and students are able to use the controllers to the virtual reality headset and click through the different muscles, bones, and systems in order to learn more about them.
Initially, when our students started this project, they didn't know any of the names of the bones or the organs or any of their muscles. They used this tool to learn the names of these organs and what they do. The technology tools that we're using today are off-the-shelf technologies that are generally used for gaming, and we're just finding creative ways to use them in education. We all like to play video games like Pokemon Go in augmented reality, or Angry Birds in virtual reality. But these tools also have incredible opportunities to support students with disabilities and students without disabilities.
The College of Education has always been ROAR's #1 supporter. So this past year, we've been able to collaborate with the pre-service teachers in the College of Education, both in Pullman as well as the Vancouver campus. And those practicum students are able to work with the ROAR students as what we're calling academic and employment mentors. And they're working with the ROAR students to complete LinkedIn micro-credentials in order to help them prepare for their careers.
We have a project with the WSU Medical School looking at ways that we can use point-of-view video to help support doctors. And we do a lot of outreach with colleagues on our Tri-Cities campus, looking at how to support this in science education at the K-12 and at the college level.
So when I see ROAR 10 years down the line, I think about a larger staff. I think about being able to service more students, as well as being just a real component within the College of Education and the state.
I think this is an exciting time to be an educator. I think this is a great time for innovation in the classroom, a great time to take technology tools and use them to help empower our students.
And joining me now is Dr. Brian French, Associate Dean of Research and External Funding at the College of Education. Dr. French, thanks so much for being here today.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. I'm grateful for the opportunity to speak to you today about the research in the College of Education.
And we just saw that video looking at things like augmented reality. Talk about some of the work that's going on.
Yeah, sure. That was a very informative video. That video is great. It represents one of our 4 labs in our Department of Teaching and Learning. And it also is part of our larger portfolio that has 8 laboratories and 1 center in our Department of Kinesiology and Ed Psych. I mention these research labs because they focus on examining things from immersive teaching and learning environments to studying biomechanics and cognitive neuroscience to modeling large-scale data. And I mention these because it highlights really a diverse portfolio of research in mental and physical performance across content domains and social cultural context. This diversity is one reason our faculty work with people all across the university.
And what kind of lab work have you been involved with personally? It sounds like you have a number of irons in the fire, so to speak.
Sure, I do. Some of the work I've been involved with encompasses a lot of the work we do in the college. My own work has been involved with developing innovative assessment systems to address risk and needs of adolescents. But I'm also excited to talk about the research we're engaged in from locally to national work. My colleagues do a fantastic job of living the land grant mission at WSU. We have faculty who focus on applying their work from such events as offering research learning nights in our local schools to some of the work we've been doing informing policy on such issues such as teacher quality in our nation's schools, to looking at informing how work environments should be structured to reduce falls in pregnant women. I get excited about these examples because it's really through this combination of both our laboratory work and our field-initiated work that the College of Education makes a difference in the lives of individuals at various stages of their lives.
I want to highlight that practicality because there's a perception that this research goes into peer-reviewed journals and things like that, but a lot of it may affect policy here.
No, that's exactly right. I think some of the work we do, it does go into academic journals, but that work then gets translated into other areas, and we might be asked to speak about those at different levels, the state level as well as the national level. And I think being able to do that's very important to show how that work impacts individuals.
Well, Dr. French, thank you so very much for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you very much, and I say thank you to my colleagues for their dedication for their research.
And now we shift colleges to the Edward R. Murrow College of Communication. And it's not just politics. Media are all around us, and there's some sense that media rule our lives, but there are ways to make it so media help us achieve our goals and not the other way around.
This work is really important to me because what I'm interested in is how can we help people manage the media environment that's getting more and more complicated all the time to be able to make decisions that are best for themselves. So how can you use the media to meet your own goals instead of being used by the media to meet other people's goals?
Over the period of this 1 year, the misinformation that has been circulating are also different. So in the beginning, it started with, oh, this is a hoax, and like COVID-19 is a hoax. But then there are more now with vaccine-related misinformation, which has come out, which is circulating a lot on social media.
And there was a lot of evolving information, but there was also a lot of circulating misinformation and disinformation. And disinformation is a little bit different from just innocuous misinformation that people just don't necessarily know what the facts are and they might get some things wrong or confused. Disinformation is really malevolent. It's designed by people who are wanting to mislead, and they use principles of persuasion in order to do it. And it preys on people's emotions. It's not based on logic, it's basically anti-logic.
A healthy dose of skepticism is good. It's good to be skeptical about the sources I'm seeing, about the things I'm hearing and reading. But the problem is when you kind of completely disregard mainstream media, completely disregard, say, hey, I mean, this is all fake news or this is all disinformation. So that's a problem. Then maybe you are not getting news from the sources that you should get.
One of the things I'm really proud of is being associated with the Edward R. Murrow College of Communication. We are training future journalists who are going to be as well prepared as you can possibly be to research what's going on out there, to give that first draft of history. We need to be really honest about what we know and what we don't know. So as a journalist, I think we need to be able to prepare people to understand what we're learning today in the context of what we've already learned from history and what we might be learning in the future as well.
And joining us now is Dr. Paul Bowles, Associate Dean of Research and Graduate Studies at the Murrow College. Dr. Bowles, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Matt. It's my pleasure.
Now, I want to talk just sort of broadly right now about research at a land-grant university like Washington State. How important is that to you?
Oh, it's extremely important. The land-grant mission has a special place at Washington State University, and certainly the Murrow College and our research enterprise plays a critical role in that research mission for land-grant university. Land-grant mission is all about producing knowledge and insights that improves the lives of Washington's citizens, the citizens of our region, and indeed global citizens. and research and the knowledge that is produced by the research activities across WSU and the Murrow College as a whole definitely is dedicated to improving lives, producing practical knowledge that can be concretely applied in improving life.
And you talked about practical knowledge, practical information. Certainly the pandemic is a topic we're all focused on. Some of the research has been involved in some of the messaging, I'm told, behind the vaccine and the virus itself.
Yes, Matt. Yeah, the practical knowledge that we produce with Murrow College research certainly applies to work that we've been doing around COVID-19. Extensive research on COVID-19. We have some of the most dedicated, passionate health communication scholars that I've ever encountered in my career here at Washington State University and the Murrow College. And all of us have been, have rolled up our sleeves and gotten our hands and brains dirty, so to speak, investigating how can we effectively communicate information that helps individuals make good, healthy decisions in their own best interests as the world tries to navigate and emerge from the pandemic. So examples of very specific studies that have gone on in our college are, for example, investigations of how media literacy, the ability to critically evaluate and process information, plays a critical role in equipping people to make good health decisions around COVID-19.
Well, Dr. Bowles, thank you very much. Really interesting stuff. Really quickly, where can people find some of this research that we're doing?
So, of course, all of the research that we do in Murrow College, again, as a land-grant university, is public knowledge. And so the knowledge gets shared in traditional means such as press releases over our website. We have a special section of our Murrow College website called Murrow Minds. But also I want to specifically mention a very exciting event for the Murrow College is coming up at the end of March, the Murrow Symposium. And of course, Lester Holt is going to be receiving a very important Murrow Award and giving a keynote address. But as part of that event, specifically on March 31st, in the afternoon, starting at 1 p.m., there's going to be a showcase, and 2 of the sessions are going to be specifically dedicated to publicly sharing the knowledge and the research that goes on by our Murrow College faculty. We have 2 sessions, one dedicated to health communication, one dedicated to political communication. So that's a free event for people to check out and access this great knowledge that's being produced through our research mission.
Well, a lot going on. Dr. Paul Bowles, thank you very much.
Thank you, Matt. My pleasure.
And it's now our privilege to be joined by Provost and Executive Vice President Elizabeth Chilton. Dr. Chilton, thanks so much for being here this evening.
It's my pleasure. What a great event.
It is a great event just because over the course of about 30-40 minutes there, we heard about a lot of different topics, a lot of great presentations tonight.
I learned a lot.
Very much so. How important is it to you, having been here for a while now, to have a top-notch research as a land-grant university?
Well, it's so critically important. And in fact, all of the positions that I've held post-PhD have really been in institutions, public higher educational institutions that are committed not only to the dissemination of knowledge, but also the creation of knowledge. And that's an amazing opportunity for our students, our faculty, and our staff to not only, learn about new things like we've heard about, but also understand how that knowledge is produced. That's really useful no matter what our students go on to do in their lives. They're learning skills, they're learning ways of knowing, ways of thinking, ways of analyzing information. And then, the dissemination of that through teaching and through events like this is also critically important.
And especially in the era we're in right now, how vital is it not only to do this research, but to be able to communicate it effectively?
So important. And I would say, over the last 10 years or so, there's been extra pressure on public universities to explain why it's important to continue to conduct research, not just teach, but to conduct research. And universities are places where we're creating a vast amount of new knowledge. We just heard the tip of the iceberg today. And getting that out in a way that our various publics and stakeholders and constituencies can understand the vast array of work that's being done is just so critically important. You know, yeah, we publish in peer-reviewed journals and we talk to each other at conferences, but it's more important now than ever to really show the broader impacts of what it is we're doing at a research university.
Dr. Chilton, thank you so much again for joining us tonight, and thanks for your insight.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Well, it's now the moment we've all been waiting for. After all the numbers have come in, we do have our 3 finalists in no particular order. They are Rob Spence from WSU Vancouver, Fumipitaliger from the College of Agriculture, Human and Natural Resources, as well as Grant Ely from the College of Nursing. And the winner of this year's 3-minute thesis, taking home a travel grant of $3,000, is Grant Ely from the College of Nursing. Just finding it out, all smiles right now. Congratulations on your performance. First of all, I want to ask how you're feeling.
Well, it was an honor to be able to speak to everyone today. The other people that presented did an amazing job. And just to have the chance to share some of these thoughts with the leadership of WSU and the community was a great honor. I've been working on this thought process since I graduated myself from WSU back in 2005. So it's kind of fun to see it all come to pass.
All right, Grant Ely from the College of Nursing, congratulations to you. Best of luck with the rest of your research, and we thank you for your presentation tonight.
Thank you very much.
Well, that's all we have for this year's 3-minute thesis. We want to thank our sponsors, the College of Education, the Murrow College of Communication, and WSU's Office of the Provost. A special thank you to our judges for their time, and above all, for these great doctoral students who not only have been doing great research, but they spent the time to tell us about it. Congratulations to all of them, but especially to WSU's 2021 winner, Grant Ely from the College of Nursing. Have a great night.